Okay, so my name is Valerie Henessee with the University of Iowa in the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Technology. I am the Unizin eText coordinator for the University of Iowa, meaning I work closely with the instructors and students on our inclusive access program that's provided through Unizin. And with me today is Jonna Higgins-Freese. She's the Director of Instructional Services, also in the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Technology. And our talk today is a new spin on inclusive access, Top Hat licensing through Icon Direct. And Jonna, you can get us started here.
Okay. So we thought it's the end of a long day and we know we're competing against Kathy. So we thought we'd give you the quick summary up front so you can make sure that you're interested and think you're in the right place. And also just kind of have the short version of what we're up to today. So the problem that we wanted to solve with the initiative that we're going to tell you about is that in general, we're all going to be needing to have to continue to find ways to provide more service to students with fewer resources. So this was a creative experiment we tried along those lines. So our students had been purchasing Top Hat directly from the vendor. We had an opportunity to buy an enterprise license, but we didn't have the money to buy an enterprise license. However, we really wished that we could because we would be able to do that for students more cheaply than the amount of money that they were paying in total to the vendor when they were buying it directly. So we thought, well, how could we do this? And what we ended up doing is we went ahead and bought an enterprise license through Unizin, and then we used Unizin's inclusive access eText program for cost recovery. So we sort of acted as a middle person reseller to resell it to the students at cost based on our estimates of how many people would purchase it. And that saved students money compared to what they would have been able to do, what they would have spent had they purchased it directly from the vendor. So just to give you a little bit of background about the pieces that we had in place that allowed this particular experiment to work. So we have a very robust inclusive access program at Iowa. And it started in 2017. Vicki Malloy is the person on the team who started it up. And as you can see, she has grown it very quickly into a very large and successful program. It has over $3 million in sales every year and has saved students, I think, something like $6 million total over the course of the time that this program has been in place. So we're very proud of that. And because of that, we have a number of faculty who are very familiar with Icon Direct, very accustomed to using it, and we had that knowledge base that we could build from. And Top Hat is our centrally supported student response system service. So a number of years ago, my predecessor, whom some of you may know, Annette Beck, one of the projects that she was very successful with was there were a number of different student response systems being used across campus. And students were not very happy sometimes when they would maybe be using one student response system in one course and one in another. And so Annette led an initiative to winnow it down to one centrally supported students response system. There are a couple of places where other students response systems are still used, but only one is centrally supported. And that has really helped to limit the number of different student response systems that students are asked to purchase. And of course, as all of you know, the student response systems have a really significant pedagogical purpose. So they help with student engagement. They can be used for formative assessment. Top Hat can be used both synchronously and asynchronously, and it does have interactive textbooks available as well. It's been integrated into Canvas since 2018. And at the beginning, at this time last year, we had 3 different price points that students could purchase Top Hat directly from the vendor. So they could buy it by the semester, by the year, or as a lifetime license. And our faculty appreciate Top Hat. They like to use it, they find it helpful, and the primary barrier to adoption that they've had is the cost to students. So last summer, early in the summer, in June, Jay Maloff at Top Hat gave me a call and pointed out the following to me. Top Hat had just come out with a new enterprise cost for their site license, which is represented by the blue bar on the far right side of the screen. And when we looked at what our students had spent both in 2020, 2021, that was about the same amount that the enterprise cost was going to be for the 2021-22 school year. And if we looked at what students had spent before the pandemic, students had spent far more on Top Hat by purchasing those individual licenses directly from the vendor than we would have spent total on a site license. However, as I mentioned, we didn't have any revenue source to fund the cost of a site license. So we tried to think creatively. Go ahead, Valerie. And what we realized was that if we could act as a reseller, if we could purchase the Top Hat site license as an enterprise and then resell it to students simply by dividing the cost of the license by the number of students we projected would purchase it, that number came out to be less than any of the previous price points that they were purchasing the product for. So we liked that idea. That looked good to us.
So in order to pull all this off, of course, it took a lot of communication and teamwork. We were very, very grateful to both Unizin and Top Hat, especially JML off at Top Hat, to provide all this ability for us to pull off this brand new system, this brand new procedure. So in the end, we were able to pull this off successfully, and the students at the University of Iowa did benefit in the lower price that we were able to provide them. So this process had a lot of technical implementation steps, and some of these were new. So we had to proceed rapidly, but very carefully and very precisely. So early in the summer, we went through a proof of concept exercise where we proved to ourselves that yes, we could technically pull this off. Of course, the University of Iowa that purchased the license from Top Hat. And then we worked with Unizin and Brad at Unizin to set the price and the term of the offering in the Unizin catalog, because that was the means where instructors would then place their orders for this new offering of Top Hat. Then we need to deal with one more aspect, because as we showed in a previous slide, there were some students that had purchased longer licenses, like either had a year license that hadn't expired, or they had purchased lifetime access from Top Hat. And so we didn't want those students to have to make another purchase again, obviously. So, and neither did Top Hat. So Top Hat was able to provide the list of the student names at Iowa that had existing licenses. And then Unizin, they gave that to Unizin, and Unizin then created what we call a backfill entitlement record for every student. So this is so that the whole process, including our opt-out procedure, which I'll cover in a second, would allow them to work through the same procedures and have the same effects and same impacts as we do with our other Unizin offerings. So we have it set up so that there's for a 16-week course, we normally have a 2-week opt-out period where the students can make their choices. Do they want these Icon Direct or Unizin inclusive access items, or do they want to opt out? So, and then especially for this situation with Top Hat, we wanted to give them a full 4 weeks to kind of activate their license, meaning they like launch it within the classroom and use it. Now, the first 2 weeks of any class can be kind of hectic for the instructors and for students. So that's why we decided to give them a 4-week period to activate this license. After that 4 weeks were up, then a paywall went up at Top Hat. But if somebody had paid for the license and hadn't activated it until after 4 weeks, there was still a process in place to get that student into Top Hat and let them utilize Top Hat that they paid for within a 48-hour period. So another part of the process that we had to sort of do some manual adjustments to was there are some situations where a student may have multiple classes that have Top Hat in them. And it's possible a student might opt out of one and not the other because they only want to pay for one instance, even though our system had set up that they would only get a charge a maximum time of 1 for Top Hat. But still, sometimes the students just wanted to, be kind of belt and suspenders and make sure they were not going to get charged multiple times. So then I would have to manually screen our opt-out list and before I processed it and gave it to Top Hat with all the information they needed to remove those students from the license list. So, okay, so now that's all the technical sort of background, but then of course we had to get our orders in, right? We had to sell it. So we did a lot of extensive marketing and outreach to all of our stakeholders. So this included the university bookstore because it was going to impact them, because previously Top Hat was offered at the bookstore, and that's where instructors made their materials adoption for Top Hat. So I worked closely with the materials manager at the bookstore, and we moved those orders from the bookstore to the Icon Direct system. Now, of course, we have to let the faculty and staff know. So because some departmental administrators place orders on behalf of faculty. So we did reach out to a lot of faculty and staff committees and explain the new process and what was going to happen and the savings that the students were going to see. We did send some personalized emails to specific faculty users of Top Hat, and I also placed some specific phone calls in certain cases. We also participated in new faculty orientation. We gave a brief presentation on the new Top Hat through Icon Direct or Unizin Inclusive Access program. And we also in this department, we like to work very closely with student government because it's very important to get their buy-in and also to make sure that they're aware of our efforts to help the students save money, because students are always very concerned with all of their attendance costs for college, including their textbook and material costs. We worked with the Center for Teaching, which is a pedagogical focus, assisting instructors on effective instruction, and we were part of an article in their newsletter. We also needed to update our help desk with new procedures so that they understood the support process and who to have students contact in particular situations. And of course, we have quite a few web pages and documentation resources that we needed to update with all this new information. And we were also very, very lucky that one of our top instructors, who's a heavy Top Hat user, was kind enough to sit down and help us by recording some videos, which we then were able to get processed and promoted in a newsletter that we had this past fall. One other item that we did was we created a Top Hat user group. This is a monthly meeting of instructors really focused on how to best utilize Top Hat. So many of them teach these large introductory classes, which we find is probably the most popular type of class to use Top Hat because of the attendance features and the in-class quizzes to sort of check for understanding and things like that. So the subject for each meeting is based on feedback from the instructors every month, and recent topics include special strategies for large lectures and some other best practices. Jonna?
So thank you, Valerie. I just want to point out that Valerie implemented all of the things that she just explained when she was just newly in her job. In fact, I think it was probably the very first day you arrived that we said, oh, we'd like you to learn how to run the Inclusive Access eText program. And also we're going to do this new thing that we've never done before. And oh, by the way, it all needs to be done within 8 weeks. So thank you for joining us. We're so glad to have you on the team. And she stayed and she didn't run away and she ran with it. And it's been quite wonderful. At the same time, our bookstore had just been taken over by a private vendor. So it had been run by the university and Follett purchased it. So there were a number of changes happening in the background there. Some of you may have attended Vicki's presentation earlier today where she talked about that process, and that the success of this was due to Vicki's ability to manage all of these changes and keep all those balls in the air at the same time. And then of course, Jay at Top Hat and Rachel and others at Unizin who helped us kind of put all these pieces together. So all of that came together such that we had a pretty successful first year. So we sold about 8,300 Top Hat licenses. That was about 3,000 short of break even. Again, though, it must be acknowledged that Valerie and Vicki had advocated for about 8,300 licenses. And I was the one who said, no, I think we can be more optimistic than that. which leads us to the conclusion, as Brad Zerker so eloquently said, Jonna, the lesson to be learned here is always listen to Valerie and Vicki. And that is definitely the lesson to be learned. We did have a low number of student and instructor emails and support tickets, so this didn't create much of a support burden for us. That Top Hat user group is growing in attendance and people really seem to like it, as the note says, especially the core. There are some core users who are very, very enthusiastic super users of Top Hat, and that's been really exciting to see. So we did learn a few lessons. The compressed timeline from decision to implementation, so implementing this all in one summer, meant that the communication was a little too frequent for some instructors about what the opportunity was and what they needed to do. Setting the price point was tricky. I will say that that ended up not being problematic for us from a financial perspective, because we had worked very closely with our finance person, and she had planned that it would take us several years to figure out what the right number of licenses to estimate was and what the price point should be. And so although I was disappointed that I had not listened to Valerie and Vicki and set it at a place where we would get to break even in the first year, our finance people were fine with that. They weren't expecting it. A little glitch that happened is that students who have multiple Top Hat classes might opt out of one Top Hat license, but keep another, and we had to adjust our procedures to account for that. And the final lesson learned was that close alignment and communication between Unizin, Top Hat, and us, as well as the bookstore to some extent, helped us to deal with those issues that arose and ensure a smooth process so that we could save students money. So as we think about what's next, we're increasing the price for academic year 22-23, but it's in line, but we're very comfortable with it because we're still saving students the same amount of money compared to the retail price that we were saving them this year. So it's kind of just it's the cost increase is in line with inflation. We're also changing the term from a full year to one semester, which will make for a little bit easier work on the back end, that we won't have to worry about students who maybe have already purchased a license in the first semester. It'll make some of that accounting and bookkeeping a little easier. And we'll continue to evaluate the program as it progresses and see if this is a way that we can still continue to help students save money and make sure that as many students as possible have access to this technology that really helps enhance their learning and the learning experience in the classroom.
Thank you, Jonna. We thought we might use Top Hat and ask you a couple questions now, just to kind of inform and maybe kick off our Q&A part of our presentation here. So if you wanted to open a browser, you can do a private or incognito browser, or and I'm going to put a link here in the chat to the Top Hat class. Make sure that you enter as guests. So if Top Hat recognizes you and says, oh, I know who you are, you already have an account, go ahead and log out and then log in as guest, and that will work the best. So I will give everybody just a minute to do that, and then I am going to start with our Top Hat questions. Okay. So here's our first question. How many students' response systems are supported at your institution? Feel free to go ahead and answer. And I do not have a timer on here, so I will just wait until I get a few answers. Got 4. Now there's about 11 of us here, but I'm not sure that everybody's going to participate. Just wait a couple more seconds. Let's see what the responses are. I did put the link to the Top Hat course in the chat. Okay, I'm going to say that's probably about how many we're going to get. So I am going to stop and let's take a look at our answers. So most say, I guess 60% of us said one, and then, but there's more than one and a don't know as well. Okay. Very good. All right, let's take a look at our next question. Which student response systems does your institution use? Now you can enter as many answers as you want in the blank that's going to be there, but any multiple word answers should have a hyphen, meaning anything that has a space between it is going to show up as a separate response. Okay, so I will open this up for some answers. This one I might give a little bit longer for people to answer. So this is going to take a little longer for people to type in. And if you don't know the names, you could always type that in as well. If you're not familiar with which ones you are using, if you don't know all the names, that's okay as well. All right, I'm going to close it here in just a minute. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it now. And we will look at this. So poll everywhere, top hat, top hat, top hat, top hat. I like that. That makes it appropriately enough that the word cloud then comes across with top hat as the biggest item with the most responses. So I appreciate that. Whoever did that, that's very cool. All right, thank you. And now our last question, what student pay model does your institution use? Okay, so this one is multiple choice and you can choose which answer here applies to your particular institution. Okay, just have a couple of answers here, but I'm not sure if anybody else wants to answer. So I will go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and close this. And we will just take a look at the responses. So it's about evenly spaced out. Some do department pay, student pay, and site licenses. So that's very interesting. Okay. So I'm going to go back. So what kind of questions do people have? We'd like to just open it up just for more of a give and take. If you have any questions about how we did this, just because, you know, we really feel like, as Jonna said at the very beginning, that there's going to be a lot of restrictions on what we're able to do, you know, and institutions are able to do in terms of coming up with big chunks of money for special programs and pieces of technology. So that was why we were very glad to participate today and kind of talk about what we did and the special things that we're able to do because of the tight partnership we have both with Top Hat and with Unizin. And the Unizin system really made this possible, and everybody there was very flexible and was able to be very adaptive to the new situations, and we very, very much appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions?
We're such a small group that folks can either pop the question in the chat or just go ahead and unmute yourself if that would be.
Yes.
Well, I think we're a small group, we can talk amongst ourselves.
You can still ask questions. I'm going to go ahead and just show this particular slide. If you do have questions or ideas later and you want to reach out to us, you're welcome to. And we have a few pages here that are links that you might find interesting or useful if you're thinking about doing something similar. So we've got our specific icon direct page and then the Top Hat page and the Unizin page.
All right, you know where to find us.
Yes.
please feel free to email us or, otherwise contact us if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.